Hi everyone, Joseph Kursky here. Let's talk about the following. Geography, GIS, Geographic Information Systems, data, education, space, and place. Let's talk about all those things. Now in this demo, where I'm going to be using ArcGIS Online 2D and 3D maps from Esri, I don't want you to get overstressed about how to do these things. I'm going to be demonstrating some things here, but I don't want you to think about how to do these, but rather just soak in what the possibilities are. Rest assured there are lessons and tutorials about how to do each one of these things that I'm going to be describing. Let's start with a 2D map inside the ArcGIS Online map viewer. I've got some layers in this map. Colorado cities, 14ers, population density, and a couple more things. I've also got bookmarks. Think of bookmarks as a way of going to certain places on the Earth's surface. I've got a Western Colorado bookmark, and I also have a Unaweep Canyon bookmark at different scales, so I can quickly go to those locations. Remember, we were going to talk about space and place. And in the layers of information that the map contains, a map can contain one layer, could contain multiple layers, but think of those as the old overhead transparency layers that you can see through. And that's the power of geographic information systems, that you can see across and through layers. So by turning on and turning off layers, notice I've also got a hydro layer, including the watershed boundaries, getting students to understand what watersheds are and how rivers flow, etc., is important because it shapes the terrain, it affected settlement, and so on. I'm clicking on the ecoregions now. Mid-elevation forests, here's where I spent a lot of my growing up years, shale deserts and sedimentary basins, that's the Manco Shale of western Colorado. So you can see that there are different ecoregions, and how are those affected by elevation, precipitation, etc. I can also use the plus sign and create a sketch layer. I can sketch on my map too with points, lines, or polygons. Let's say I'm interested in looking at a historical explorer or explorers and their route. I can trace on the map and get the students to understand what terrain, what rivers did they follow, what mountains did they traverse, canyons did they explore, etc. I can click on any one of these features and change the symbology, the colors, the fonts. All this is interactive and changeable. I can also, for example, make a polygon in my sketch. So, for example, let's say I want to highlight a certain area of the map with a rectangle or a circle or a square. I can do that too. So I've got sketch capabilities on the map as well. That becomes a separate layer, just like my hydro, my population density, my ecoregions, my 14ers, and my Colorado cities. That becomes a separate layer that I can actually edit and modify. So sketching can be a powerful tool of instruction with mapping. I'm going to turn these layers off and get to the base map. Now I'm going to browse layers to show you how I actually built this map in the first place. There's no shortage of data out there from government agencies, nonprofits, private industry, academia. So let's say I wanted to add land use and land cover from the Sentinel-2 satellite. I can add land cover, get the students to understand where the orchards are versus the desert versus the high elevations, the alpine regions, forest. So land cover. Wow, fascinating. So at a single glance, I can see where the cultivated lands are in western Colorado or anywhere else around the world. Many of these layers are global in scale and scope. I can make the transparency a little bit translucent there so that I can see through the land cover layer into the terrain, so I can see what the relationship is between land cover and the terrain. I can also change to a satellite image if I want, and the other choices that you have there. You've got about 25 different base maps at your fingertips as well. At multiple scales, it's very powerful in terms of exploration, teaching, and learning. So this is, in sum, an ArcGIS Online 2D map with about 8 layers in it, and I built that map with the bookmarks so that you can explore it. I've shared it so that you can explore it. Now notice some of these layers are incredibly detailed. Look at the terrain there at Colorado National Monument. Again, part of my homeland. I spent a lot of time there as a kid. Fascinating looking at the canyons and the steps and the box canyons, etc. in that area. Notice that I've got some tools that I can measure things. How big is that canyon? I can use metric or imperial units, whatever I want. I can measure lines
areas. Let's say I want to measure an area. How big is that canyon right there? Is it 1 football field? Is it 10 football fields? So I can sketch around here and measure the area. It looks like about half a square mile, or I'm changed to metric. I've got about 1 million square meters, or if I change it to square kilometers, that should be right around 1 square kilometer, right? 1 million square meters, yes, 1.07 square kilometers. So I've got different choices there, but being able to do this with these tools at your fingertips is very powerful. You can also search. I'm going to go search on Montrose, Colorado. It's going to zoom me right there, and I can also add that to my sketch. So I've got a permanent point at Montrose, Colorado. So that's another thing that you've got at your fingertips as well. A 2D map inside ArcGIS Online. It's interactive. You can embed it in a website. Do a lot with it with these tools at your fingertips. Wonderful. I'm going to pan across the state of Colorado and see what the variations are between the area of study in western Colorado versus Utah, New Mexico, and some surrounding areas. Okay, let's go to a different tool. This is a 3D tool where you can get a 3D terrain profile. So I'm going to, again, look at the search box. I'm going to search for Nucla, Colorado, one of the greatest places on the planet. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. And with this tool, that is really the only one at my fingertip in this particular web mapping application, is I'm going to trace this could be an explorer's route. This could be just a freehand trace as I'm doing here. And notice how the terrain profile changes. Now it's a 2D profile, but as I move across the landscape, let's say I'm interested in going up this canyon. What's the terrain going to be as I go up this canyon to Pinto Mesa? And as I scroll along the once drawn trace, notice how that it shows me where I am on the 2D trace as well as the path along the landscape. And I get some data on that terrain profile. Oh, that's just absolutely wonderful. I'm going to go to Mesa, Colorado on the slopes of the Grand Mesa because I want to see how flat that Grand Mesa truly is. So I'm going to go and use the same tool again. I'm going to delete the existing one and go from let's say, Palisade up to the Grand Mesa. Again, a different scale now, but that's another good tool to teach students, right? What's scale and how does it matter? Why does scale matter? What is map scale? So see how flat that top of that mesa is. Said to be the highest mesa in the world, the Grand Mesa in western Colorado. Wonderful. Let's go to another place now. I'm going to look at Mount Garfield, sedimentary part of the Book Cliffs, and I can see that terrain profile right there from the lowlands in the Grand Valley. And here's a photograph I took of Mount Garfield and the Book Cliffs so I can compare. That looks pretty similar. And that's exactly what that terrain profile is showing me. Oh, that's just so wonderful to be able to compare ground photographs to these 2D and 3D mapping tools. Let's look at another mapping tool now. This is all part of ArcGIS Online. This is a 3D scene sample. And I've got a couple of lines drawn on there, line of sight. What can I see from a certain place on the terrain? What can I not see from a certain place on the terrain? What's visible to me? And again, just like before, we've got measure area. We can measure. I really like this one because as you're measuring, you've got this 3D effect. So you can really see that that's the mesa, and I can change the units as well. I really like this as well as I scroll across here. I've seen that terrain profile as we saw before, but notice now, because I've got it in 3D, I see the vertical change as well as the horizontal change. Notice that angle there. Got that right angle, but I also see the depth as I go down into that canyon and across the canyon into the adjacent flatlands, the tablelands. This is absolutely fascinating to be able to do this. How does this terrain compare to Mount Everest or, Mount Blanc in Switzerland, etc.? Is this higher, steeper, lower, etc.? So lots of things that you can do here. You can also change the time of year and look at the shadows and figure out, okay, not just the time of day, but the time of year. If I scroll back to January, I'm going to see some bigger shadows because of the sun angle being lower at that time of year. So a couple of tools that you have at your fingertips, I think, are quite powerful and yet easily used. It's online. There's nothing to install. You can use it on any computer, a Mac, a PC, a tablet, even a phone. Although a phone, you're going to get a little bit limitations on the amount of real estate that you have on a phone. But any browser, anytime, anywhere that you can use these tools. You have to have a halfway decent internet connection, but that's really the only technological barrier that you've got here. Let's take a look at one more tool now as I just, again, look at different scales. I think scale and looking at terrain is just so powerful to be able to do this. I used to work at the U.S. Geological Survey, so I love geomorphology and looking at landforms and evolution of landscapes and human impact on the landscape, etc. And having this at your fingertips with these tools is really quite powerful. Let's take a look at one more, and that one more tool, but it's all still part of that ArcGIS Online project or platform that I talked about earlier. This is going to look familiar because we're going to look at some of the same layers we looked at originally when I started this video. You're going to see the layers that I had loaded in that map, but now I'm going to look at it in the 3D. So I've got a 3D application. So now I've got the land cover, the cities, the land use, etc. And I've got an elevation profile once again, so I can, again, do what I have done several times now in this demonstration, but I've got the additional layers at my fingertips as well of the things that we started with. But I really like this one because you're seeing the elevation profile draped over the 3D terrain. So notice how you're seeing that I'm dropping it into that canyon. So now as I scroll across the elevation profile, I'm seeing it in 3D on the map. Just having this side by side is just so incredibly rich with content and lots of teachable moments here as well. So having the students think about scale, X, Y, slope, aspect, etc. We can change it to 2D as well and do some of the same things here in 2D that we could in 3D. So those are both very powerful. And notice I've got my bookmarks again, so I can go back to Western Colorado or Uniweep Canyon as I see the need to. And you can set up your own bookmarks with these tools as well. No shortage of capabilities at your fingertips. I have essays on the advantages of teaching and learning with geospatial technology, but they include spatial thinking, holistic thinking, systems thinking, using the same tools as a scientist or a planner or a civil engineer would actually use in the workplace. Inquiry, looking at different variables, different scales, different interaction between human and environmental systems and variables. Human interaction over space and time, change over space and time, multidisciplinary thinking, and much more. These are the advantages to teaching and learning with geospatial technology, and I hope these few examples here give you some inspiration for what you can do in your own learning environments. Thanks for being with me.